Hi, welcome back to my beginners series, and where I'm going through some very simple steps and techniques. So this is an 8th Imperial piece of paper, so nice and small. It is Saunders Waterford. It's cotton paper, but I just want you to use whatever paper you've got. I've also got a cotton palette here. It's a travel palette. I'll pop a link in the description. And I have 3 brushes. I'm using a round number 10, a round number 6, and a rigger. These are all a synthetic blend. So I'm going to just quickly draw out where the rocks and flowing water will be. So this is going to be the hillside, and then the river is going to come down here. I'm going to have a bit of a shelf, as in where the water is falling down and flowing, just here. I'm going to have some big rocks. So this is very loose drawing because we're going to pop the rest in with painting. So you've got some big rocks this side and some big rocks that side. Okay, so if I wet the whole thing, I'm going to get a little bit of a base layer on first. So this is with my round number 10. I'm taking the water all the way across, so it's nice and shiny. I've got some cerulean blue, whichever blue you have will work. I'm going to pop a little bit in on the sky and a little bit on the top of the water. A little bit down near the bottom of the rocks. So I'm leaving a big white section. Bring this cerulean blue over most of the rock. So basically I want a big white patch in the middle. I'm going to come into, I've got here sap green. And this is a really fresh green. So I've loaded my brush with water, I've dabbed into that, and I'm going to dab into a little bit of a brown as well. So I want this to be a much more neutral green. I'm going to bring that in to this distant hillside here. And pick up around number 6, and then some of the burnt umber, just dabbing in, following the line of the land, just so I've got a nice distant hillside happening there. The brown will mix nicely with the green, so I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that's nicely dry, and it needs to be before you come in for this next stage. What I've got is basically a wax crayon. It's just a bit of candle wax. And I'm going to use this to circle round to create some wax resist in the water. Now it's always a challenge using wax resist because you can't see what it's doing, but you basically want to get a little bit. So I'm using a sort of circular action in the bottom of the water. You want a couple of glimpses in the top. And then where the water is flowing, I want you to stroke downwards. But I don't want you to stroke so you create a pattern. I want you to stroke in sections. You'll see when I come on, hopefully, when I come on with the paint, what this is achieving, and then you'll know what you need to stroke. So I say definitely watch it through first. Okay. So if I now pick up my round number 10, it would help if it didn't have green on it, pop a little bit of water onto this area. I should hopefully see where the wax has been. You can see it resisting. Only a little bit. If you haven't got much, then I want you to not take the paint in everywhere. You can see the wax resist appearing. just about. Towards the back, I'll bring a little bit more in. It's always random. Anything that is created in this way is always random. So you've just got to be prepared that it might not work as well as you think every time. So this is a little bit of grey, which I've made with ultramarine and burnt umber. And I just want to get a little bit of that in whilst this is still wet. So it'll help to denote the rock that it's coming over. Help to denote some shadow as well. And just takes a little bit towards this background. And it helps with the flow. So you can see I'm just following the flow. There's quite a lot of wax that's worked in the strokes downward, but not so much in this bottom bobbly section. If you don't have wax, you can do it without. You've just got to leave areas without the paint. You can see that this is working quite nicely. The wax is very delicate. Okay, so I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so that's nicely dry now. So we're going to come into this back hillside and get this in nice and strong. So this one's in the distance. This one we want to be much bolder. We've got these rocks coming in front of it as well. So I'm going to use the same colour, which is the sap green, with a dab of the burnt umber. So I get a really nice natural looking green because the sap green's very fresh. And I'm bringing this on with my round number 10. Dab into both. So I've got some rocks here, so I'm just going to make sure that I'll give a nice top edge to those rocks. Though they can be darker, so it doesn't necessarily matter. Now I'm going to come in with just a little bit of burnt umber, following the line of the land. So I start to create a little bit of shadow on here, a bit of texture. A little bit of ultramarine. So I dipped my brush into the water, but I haven't actually rinsed my brush. It should be more of a greyer blue. So I just want this to be a bit darker. So this is all getting it a little bit darker. If at any point you're struggling to do your lines, then swap down to a smaller brush. A smaller brush will put you much more in control. So this is my number 6. Come in. Dip into a little bit more of the ultramarine. If I take a mixture of the sap green, a dab of the ultramarine and a dab of the burnt umber, I'll get a nice dark green. I'm not going to introduce another green in. I could do, but I'm not going to, because this is going to give a much better synergy using the same colours. So what I'm doing now is taking that thicker green in while there's still a sheen to create a bit more texture. You've got a really nice grassy bank appearing here. Letting the watercolour do its thing. I'm going to swap back to my round number 10. I'm going to leave this bit till that other bit's dry, but I'm going to come into the rocks here. So I need a nice dark colour, which is my ultramarine blue and burnt umber. If you have something like Payne's Grey, you can use that. That will work perfectly. You're going to get a nice edge on these rocks. I just want you to fill that section in, and then I want you to dab in to some ultramarine blue and create a few dabs in there. This is my trusty little bit of bank card. So I've cut a little bit of bank card down. I have many of these. They are great for rocks. You can do it with a palette knife as well, but the palette knife's much bigger. So a corner will indent, so you can create a craggy effect when it's wet, that you will see a corner. So let me just come in a little bit and you'll see this. So I'm making the rock shapes now, just by indenting the paper. So I've got several rocks there, all showing. Then you've got to wait for the sheen to go a little bit, but then what I'm going to show you is how you can use the edge to scrape the highlights into the rock. So you're going to use the flat scrape along the rock. If it's too wet, it will run back. If it's too dry, it will do nothing. It's about getting it at the right point. So this was a little bit wet because it's run back. So it's a case of just waiting and then coming in and doing it again. See, perfect. You can follow the line of the rock. This one's a little bit wet still. And scrape with the flat and you'll get a beautiful rock effect. Okay, so whilst that's drying, because this is still wet enough that I can't scrape, I'm just going to pop a little bit on this side. So it's exactly the same process. I'm utilising that grey, little bit of water, because it's a big area, you need a little bit of water in there to help spread the paint and for it not to dry too quickly. And then I'm going to dab into the ultramarine blue. The ultramarine blue is granulating and it's going to give extra tone in different places. So now I've got two sides that I'm waiting really for them to dry. So I can draw in the shapes of these rocks. The shapes can be any way you want them to be. As long as they're sitting together. They could be sitting together with big gaps. Little rocks in between. That works quite nicely. So I can come back over to this side now and just scrape. This is just at the perfect point now to be able to scrape these shapes into the rock. You follow the surface of the rock, it'll look much more natural. And you don't have to do every single side, so you can leave bits dark and bits lighter. Come over to this side, don't want to do that. So scrape. You get some really nice rocky effects. It's a great way to texture. The smaller the bit of credit card, the easier you will find this, because you're not trying to take around a big palette knife or anything like that. The other thing you can do at this point is add extra bits of dark. Because rocks are quite craggy anyway, you can lend to getting that extra dark in at this stage and it working as craggy bits. So if I want to make this bit a bit darker in the centre, take some extra bits in, I can do. And that still works really nicely. I've taken an extra little bit in there. It tends to run through the indents that you've already done and work really nicely and effectively. You can also pop little bits of rock in within your water, but make sure you're hitting sections that haven't got the candle wax on, because otherwise it won't work. It'll be a bit too bright. And then with a clean wet brush you can just flow those in. So at the corners, I'm touching the corners and it all flows within. If I come back into the cerulean blue a little bit, I can create it a little bit more bubbly at the bottom. This is the bit where the masking fluid hasn't worked as well. And not the masking fluid, sorry, the wax. Masking fluid, you can do it, but you've got to rub that off after. You can take a few little extra bits of the cerulean blue down. It's all denoting movement in the water really, so it's quite effective. All these little strokes. Just creating the movement and the flow. Okay, so I'll dry that off and take the tape off. And there we go, so that's all finished. So a few other different techniques for you there. I can always add more to these pictures, but I'm always very mindful that as a beginner, everything can get very overwhelming. So I'm keeping them really simple so that you're learning a few little techniques step by step, and day by day these build, and then you'll be able to move on to more complex pictures. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll pop a link here for my beginners playlist, and I shall see you next time.